You heard Justice Minister Lametti there reacting to Alberta's gun announcement today. He was actually announcing that the federal government intends to delay the expansion of MAID, that's medical assistance in dying, to people suffering from mental illness. Now, mental health advocates have raised serious concerns over its broad criteria and worry about the feasibility of the expansion set to happen in March.
We know we need to get this right in order to protect those who are vulnerable. Today, we are letting Canadians know that our government intends to work with our parliamentary colleagues in the House and Senate to negotiate an extension of the March 17th, 2023 eligibility date. This will require legislation.
All right, Karina, a busy day for the Justice Minister, the Liberal government. By the way, the CBC's Karina Roman is here to walk me through this. I should introduce her. They're going to need support to get this done, right? The House rose yesterday, and it won't be back until the end of January. So the minister says it has to be negotiated. Did he give any sense of the timeline for when they want this passed?
Well, I mean, obviously they would like it passed before March 17th, which is when the deadline, but he wouldn't really go there. He said he doesn't want to negotiate in public, but he does say that in talking to MPs from other parties, he does feel like support is there for legislation that would extend the deadline. When asked if there's a chance that the expansion wouldn't go ahead at all, he said, well, no, that would require a whole nother set of legislation that would likely fall afoul of the courts. Now, he was also asked, why the need for the delay. Until recently, it seemed pretty set that this was going to happen when it was going to happen. And he said, well, first of all, there's concerns about the readiness of the very people they're going to ask to assess people who apply to do this, but as well, the readiness of the healthcare system, considering the impact of the pandemic over the last couple of years. He said also there is this joint committee that won't be reporting back until February, parliamentary committee, and this will give them more time to consider whatever recommendations they have. And finally, he said, really, they just want to ensure that there's safe and consistent application of this across the country and that they don't make mistakes.
Yeah, we had Dr. Valerie Taylor from the University of Calgary on the show a couple of weeks ago outlining these concerns that they're not opposed to it, but we gotta be ready before we do this or we could have unintended consequences. So, Karina, we heard from Justice Minister David Lametti, but also Minister for Mental Health, Carolyn Bennett. What else do they have to say today?
Well, they did acknowledge the concerns over the very idea of expanding it to mental illness. I mean, that's still very controversial for some people. So they, answered questions about whether, we should be giving access to, some people say, an easier access to death than the access to the mental health supports that might take away some of the suffering that people are feeling with their mental illness. There's long waits for access to psychiatrists and other mental health professionals. He was also asked, Lametti was, about suicide ideation and, what about someone who just decides this is sort of a substitution for that. And he said that if someone is contemplating suicide, they need to go get help. MAID is not the solution for them. That's not what it's there for, and that's not what it'll be used for. But they were also very emphatic. This expansion will happen. And, Carolyn Bennett saying there are safeguards in place, the same ones that are in place for people who try and access MAID, with an actual physical ailment or disease. There's 2 clinicians who have to assess that we're talking about long-term mental illnesses, not something that's recently diagnosed. It has to be an irremediable condition, one that's causing suffering, and they have to have the capacity to make that decision. So I would say all eyes will be January 30th when the MPs come back. Right. We'll see whether they take the opportunity to introduce new legislation that day. And if so, we'll get a sense, I suppose, of what the extension is that they're looking for in terms of timelines. Yeah,
it may even be something we get an update on before Parliament comes back, because they'll probably have those meetings before that happens. All right, Karina, thanks for walking us through this. CBC's Karina Roman. Okay, we're going to turn now to another controversy within the medical assistance in dying law. The government is investigating reports that several veterans were advised to use it.
At least a half a dozen veterans now report that they have been advised that medical assistance in dying might be the best solution for them. How many veterans have been given the recommendation that they should go to medical assistance in dying? The number, please.
Number 1 would be too many, and that is why we condemn in the strongest terms anyone who has recommended that to our veterans. Our veterans lived a life of service and deserve the utmost quality of care from our governments.
Okay, so what is the government doing to make sure these reported incidents stop? Veterans Affairs Minister Lawrence MacAulay is with me now. Minister MacAulay, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
I'd like to start with your ongoing investigations into veterans being offered medical assistance in dying by an employee of your department. Has your investigation yielded any new cases? Where are we on that?
No, well, in fact, as you know, when it started first, we had 2, and then we had the investigation. It went to 4, and then we extended the investigation, and in fact, it's now turned over to the RCMP. So that's basically where we are. It's not over.
Is it 4 cases or is it 5 cases? I've seen different interpretations of where it is.
Well, the only thing I can deal with, David, is facts. And for us, we've scanned over hundreds of thousands of files, and we have found 4 cases and 1 employee involved in the 4 cases. One person, 4 cases, totally unacceptable, and we have to deal with it.
And so what is the status of that employee now who is under investigation here?
Well, as you know, it's a HR issue, and of course, she is not, this employee is not dealing with veterans at all. Since I heard it, she has not dealt with veterans from that time to this.
You know, I remember this very issue was raised as a possibility when medical assisted in dying was first being debated in 2016. So you say it's not acceptable. What steps and measures are you going to take to make sure something like this doesn't happen again?
Well, of course, along with asking for the deputy to investigate, I also asked him to make sure we had an information program with Veterans Affairs staff. We have. I think all the staff now has been well informed, and of course, if you cannot control what a veteran will bring up, but if a veteran brings up this issue, they will bring it to the supervisor and it will be dealt with from there. Okay. We do not, never did, provide information on MAID. That's between the doctor and the patient.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, if a veteran brings it up, you have a protocol now for where that veteran could be referred or how they could handle it, or do they just go right to the supervisor? I mean, how is that request dealt with in the moment if the veteran raises it?
If a veteran brings it up to a caseworker, the caseworker is instructed to bring it immediately to the supervisor, and the supervisor deals with it. It's an issue that's to be dealt with, as I said, between the doctor and the patient, and that's the way it must be. We do not and will not provide that information.
So what sort of guardrails are in place now to stop another employee from doing this sort of thing? I mean, I know there's only so much control you can have on an individual who decides to violate the rules, but what sort of parameters and guardrails have you put in place?
Well, of indicating an information program for our caseworkers and frontline workers to make sure that they do not discuss this issue at all. It's been now and this day, of course, it's been highlighted so well with the media on that, but we have to make sure that down the line that frontline workers do not discuss this issue, because it's not an issue that we provide and will not. And as I said, it goes directly to the supervisor.
So I appreciate there are HR limitations and you can't talk about this person who is under police investigation, but should not going forward, can you make this a firing offense, that if an employee brings this up, I mean, that this is, you're out of here, you don't deserve to work for Veterans Affairs Canada if you're going to do this sort of thing? Well,
of course, number one, I do not want to affect the investigation. I was Solicitor General at one time, and I understand you cannot. Mm-hmm. I understand if you're a cabinet minister, you cannot get involved in investigations, and this will be dealt with, but the proper protocol has to be followed.
Okay, one of the other things you're dealing with in your department is a backlog on disability claims in particular, and you've hired hundreds of temporary employees to help clear this backlog. Where is it as we head into the holiday season? What kind of progress have you made there?
Well, I'm pleased you asked that. Of course, it's still not where it should be, but David, it was at 23,000, now it's around 8,600. We've invested about over $340 million in this program to bring staff up to scratch, and obviously we're on track to make sure that we meet the national standard by next summer, which is 80% of the files dealt with within 16 weeks.
Right, so the numbers you just mentioned, the 23,000 number and the 8,600 number, it was 23,000 outstanding cases, is down to 8,600 outstanding cases. So you've cleared about 2/3 of it, but that's taken months and months and months. So there's still a long way to go to get to that national standard you're talking about.
The national standard, I can tell you, will be reached by next summer. That was the track that we went on, and that's the track we have and will meet, and it's important that we do. As you know, of course, the new applications for years have increased by about just about 50%, so people are accessing are trying to access the funds and should. What we want to make sure is that veterans feel comfortable coming to Veterans Affairs. It's something they fully deserve, and we want to make sure that veterans receive the remuneration they should.
Okay, one more topic I want to cover with you, and this is yesterday, House of Commons Committee. It tabled its report calling for an end to what's known as the Gold Diggers Clause, which I'd never heard of really until now, but it's a 1901 provision for people at home meant to stop women from marrying dying veterans over 60 to try and get their pensions. 1901 is a long time ago. Veterans are living well past 60. Many of them are marrying well past the age of 60, but their spouses are still getting caught in this. So your party promised to do away with this clause in 2015. Why hasn't it been done, and will it be done, especially now that the committee has made this recommendation?
Well, of course, as you're aware, I just received the recommendation from the committee, and I will be studying that recommendation and then make whatever decisions we will on that issue. It's, of course, an overall government issue.
Sure, but the committee made a recommendation now at the end of 2022. You ran for this party in 2015 when it was first promised, so
I ran
you had some
ago, David.
Sure, but you had some idea in 2015 of what this was about, right? I mean, it's in the plan. It's a promise. So 7 years later, I mean, where are we?
What I can tell you is there has been a study done by the committee, and I have that just a few days ago, and I will be studying that, and we'll go from there.
It does seem like a real anachronism, though. I mean, a lot of veterans get married after 60. A lot of people have second marriages. People in my extended family have done that. It seems odd in 2022, almost 2023, to have something like this on the books, doesn't it?
Well, it's something that we're dealing with and will continue to deal with, and that's why the study was done by the department.
Okay, but
by the committee.
You're not going to give me a clear, firm answer on this today, are you?
Well, I wouldn't be in a position to do that because you don't ask for a study unless you review the study and make sure that you do.
No, but it was it's a 7-year-old election promise. I just wonder why we're at the point now that the committee's only getting to the study.
What's important with government is to make sure, David, that you do everything as properly as you can, and that's what we're trying to do.
Okay. Lawrence MacAulay, thanks for coming in. Have a happy holidays.
David, thank you very much. Appreciate being here.